Hi everyone, this is my review of the Cold Steel American Lawman. This is model number 58AL. Just to give you my real quick answer up front, I think it's an excellent knife and it has instantly risen in the ranks to become one of my favorite EDC knives of all time. You won't pay too much for this knife. It's not very expensive. It'll run you anywhere from $50 to $70 online. You might pay a little bit more if you buy directly from Cold Steel themselves or if you purchase from a brick and mortar retail store. So the price will fluctuate a little bit, but typically online in the $50 to $70 range is what you'll pay, which I think is an excellent price, and it makes this knife a really great value for all that you're getting. It is made in Taiwan, so it is not a US made knife, although the company Cold Steel is based out of California here in the US. Give you some quick little close-ups on the blade and handle there. Right off the bat, I love the design of the knife. I like the size, the shape, and the weight, and I think they all really combine well to arrive at an excellent design that's very comfortable, carries quite easily and comfortably, and cuts excellently. It's just a really great all-around knife. This was designed by Andrew Demko, who has been a custom knife maker for some time, and his custom designs, like his very popular 8010, are very expensive. They go for quite a bit of money. I don't ever plan on setting aside enough money to pick one of those up, so I'll just kind of have to live vicariously through the photos of other knife enthusiasts online who show off their collections that include one of his knives. But I can get close with this knife, and I'm really pleased to say that his design in this knife is excellent. And he definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to building a very heavy-duty, strong, and quality folding knife. And this one's, I think he and Cold Steel really have a hit on their hands with this. There is another variation on this knife. It is the Mini Lawman, which is actually significantly different in its design. It's got a different blade shape. It's got several finger grooves throughout the handle here. And it's just really a drastically different design. It has some similarities, but to me it's not really a shrunk down version of the standard Lawman. There's enough different in it to almost necessitate a different model name, but they decided to go with the Lawman name as it is designed by Andrew Demko as well. And if you're looking for something a little bit smaller than this, you might check that one out. I've owned this for almost 2 months, and I've been carrying it almost exclusively as my non-work EDC knife. I have swapped in a couple other knives, including the Spyderco Endura, the SOG Trident, and the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, but this one has really kind of had the lion's share of my everyday EDC general task duties. So the specs on this knife I'll get through real quick, and then I'll kind of get into more of the meat of the matter as far as what I like and don't like about this knife. Blade length 3.5 inches. It is 8 1/8 inches open overall. So when opened all the way, 8 1/8 inches is your length, and then closed, you're looking at 4 3/4 inches. So it's not one of the longer knives. If you've watched some of my other reviews, you know I prefer knives to be a little bit closer to 4 inches in length. But the size and weight of it really makes up for it, and like some others that I've tried and reviewed in the past, it feels like a larger knife, and it feels like a longer knife, and it cuts similarly as well. Weight is only 4.5 ounces. For such a thick and stout knife, 4.5 ounces is what you'll get for weight, and it feels lighter than that. It's a light 4.5 ounces, I should say, and that's probably mostly due in part to the G10, the solid G10 handles. They are not skeletonized. I don't know if you'll see it in this light, but there's no milled out portions inside. It is not at all skeletonized, and there are no steel liners. So what you see here is just 2 solid slabs of G10, and then you have a aluminum lock bar, and then obviously you've got a little bit of business going on at the pivot with some washers, and you have the back spring in there. But that G10, the 2 G10 slabs make this very light, or at least it feels very light, and it's quite comfortable. It doesn't feel weighty, even compared to some other knives that have the same weight but are made of different materials. It's got a really fast and light kind of vibe to it. Blade steel is AUS 8A. which I know a lot of people have reservations about that steel. It does, tend to need to be sharpened a little bit more frequently than some of the quote-unquote super steels that are out there. But it's actually one of my preferred steels, right along with 8CR13 MOV, because it's such an easy to sharpen steel. And a lot of times, if you're out in the field, like with my work knife, which is a Spyderco Tenacious, sometimes you need to sharpen your knife, and it's nice to have something that's going to come up to a razor's edge with just a few strokes on your average sharpening stone. And that's what you'll get with AUS 8A. It's not terribly difficult to sharpen at all. In fact, this one strops up incredibly quickly and comes right back to a razor's edge. From the factory, it did indeed have a very sharp edge. It came very sharp, and it'll be easy to maintain that because of that slightly softer steel. I have not had any rust issues with this knife at all, and I'm sure that is due mostly to the black coating that you'll see on here. One of the things about this knife that is a little bit interesting to me is that previously I had heard that this coating in years past was very easy to remove, was a very thin, almost a simple coating of paint, and was very simple to remove. And then as I did a bit more research, I found that the newer release of the Lawman, which I'm not really sure how to distinguish from the older ones, actually has a tougher material that's harder to remove. Now, I bought this new, like I said, less than 2 months ago, so I imagine that I have that newer coating. And in fact, through all my cutting with this knife, you can see some faint scratches in the light as I turn the blade a little bit. There is a little bit of scuffing here and there are some worn bits, but overall the coating has held up very well for considering all the cuts that I've made with it. So this newer coating on here is quite durable. However, I do know that there is a nice stonewash finish hiding underneath that coating, so I do plan to remove this. The reason I didn't do it before the review is I wanted to show the knife in its factory state, so that you could see how it would arrive to you if you purchased one today. But I do want to remove that coating, and now that I'm working on this review, I plan on removing it very soon. But rust definitely has not been an issue. Blade thickness, 3.5 millimeters. It's nicely thick stock. The blade feels very strong, very tough. I know some people like to pry with their knives. I don't. Considering this is a slightly softer steel and it is of such thick stock, this would probably hold up a bit better for prying tasks than some other knives. It was not at all a consideration in my purchase. I never pry with knives, but if you are the type that would consider doing so, this wouldn't probably not be your worst choice. So keep that in mind. Blade shape obviously is a drop point, and I think it's a very attractive design. And it is a high hollow grind, so it is a deeply hollow grind, and it sits very high. You can see just how far back from the original stock of steel it is cut there. And because of how high it's ground, it has a feel very similar to a full flat ground blade, and I find it slices easily and doesn't get caught up in material at all. Just kind of flies through cardboard, and cutting paracord and rope and twine, it just kind of jumps right through without any issues. So I'm really pleased with the grind, and I like it. I think that it looks really nice and it's very effective. As I mentioned before, the handle material is linerless G10. Let me talk about the texturing real quick. Very aggressive texturing right from the factory. It's very pronounced and it's very grabby, and when you hold it in your hand, it is not going anywhere. I don't care if your hands are wet or oily or whatever. Just like Cold Steel's ad copy says, this thing is going to stay in your hand, and it's not going anywhere. So I'll give them high marks for that. I have heard of people sanding down this texturing because it was so rough. Some people found that it was kind of scuffing up their pants. Over the 2 months that I've worn this, I have actually noticed, because I've carried it so often and used it so many times, I have noticed that the G10 has slightly softened, and I have not had to sand it. So I'm pleased to say that while it is very aggressive, I have not had any issues with it tearing up my pockets at all. One of the things that I did do was, as you see, the pocket clip here sits completely against the handle scale, as it should. This tension on this spring portion of the steel was very, very tight, and so it was really hard to lift it and even to slide it onto my pocket. It took a bit of effort. So what I did do is I removed the pocket clip, and then I used 2 pairs of pliers, actually 2 small Leatherman tools, and I bent it just a little bit to ease that tension so it wasn't quite so aggressive, and it slips a lot easier into my pocket now. So that's something you might try if you run into that same issue should you purchase this knife yourself. The construction is with Torx screws, and as is common today, we have a T8 Torx screw at the pivot, and then T6 body screws, and then also the pocket clip screws, which they provide you 6 of. Those are all T6 on both sides. And this is how if you buy one today, this is how it'll come. You'll have the extra screws sort of set flush in the opposite depression for the pocket clip. And it does come with 2 pocket clips, one for right-handed users and one for left-handed users, which is interesting. It's a nice touch, and it maintains the curve on the clip regardless of which side you tend to carry it on. It is a closed back design, so cleaning this knife may not be the easiest task. You might have to get in there with a little bit of compressed air, or get in there with a paper towel or a napkin or a rag or something to kind of wipe it out, but it shouldn't really be much of an issue. It does have just the slightest bit of jimping, and it is only at the back of the handle, right at the spine there, right at the base of the blade, and I am very pleased to say that that is the only jimping on this knife. I'm not the biggest fan of it. This one is subtle, but it is effective. It does hold your thumb or your finger in place should you press into those little indentations, but nothing overly aggressive. It doesn't bite into your hand or become irritating in any way, which is really cool. We do have a lanyard hole, and that'll fit your 550 paracord just fine, and you can probably even double it through there with a bit of effort, but if you go through with the single strand or the single length of paracord, it fits perfectly, so that's really cool. You don't have to sit there fighting with it. Pocket clip is, like I said, left or right hand compatible, and you do receive 2 clips in the package with the knife. It is only tip up, so there is no tip down, which lends the knife a little bit of a cleaner look, but if you do prefer tip down carry, you're going to be out of luck with this knife. Pocket clip strength, as I mentioned, the tension's really strong, and just the overall strength of it, how it's actually attached to the handle and how it feels in my pocket is excellent. I have no worries about losing the knife due to the clip. I don't think it's going to come unclipped at any point. It does carry very comfortably in your pocket. It sits quite low. You can see you'll have about a ½ inch of the knife sticking out, but with so much knife in your pocket, I sincerely doubt you're going to have any issues with the knife falling out. If you have some problem with knives being exposed in your pocket, you're going to want to go for something with a deep carry clip. But I think this one sits very discreetly in your pocket, so I think that's very nice. Overall balance is great from front to back. Now you can see that there is that extra finger groove, that extra choil that's right at the base of the blade, so you can kind of move up on the knife for finer work, having a little bit more control, and I absolutely adore that feature. I think that it works expertly. Super comfortable regardless of which position you want to hold it in. If you have your hand farther back, your thumb kind of rests right on that jimping. If you want to kind of tighten up and get into some more fine cutting, simply move your index finger into that groove and your thumb naturally moves up onto the blade. This is my preferred method of holding a knife typically, especially if I'm doing something very intensive or something that requires a lot of control, and it feels wonderful. It's just excellent. So I have nothing but good things to say about the balance and the overall comfort. It's not handle heavy, it's not blade heavy in any position. It just feels right for me, front to back, inside to side, everywhere is perfect. Opening mechanism is an adjustable thumb stud, and when I say adjustable, it can be switched from left hand to right hand. So as you can see there, when the thumb stud is fully installed, one side sticks up a little bit farther than the other. It is threaded, and also on one side it has a flathead screw. So that little slotted portion, you just turn with your screwdriver, it'll loosen, you can remove both halves of the thumb stud, switch it to the other side for lefties, and then now the higher rising portion of the thumb stud will be on that left hand side, which is very clever, and it was a nice touch. Instead of just having them even, I kind of like that it's a little bit off to the side like that. A little bit askew is kind of slick, and it makes it a little bit more comfortable. The other side doesn't stick up as much, and you just have easier access on your dominant side, right or left-handed. The pivot is very smooth. It's not quite as smooth as some other knives, and I don't know if that's because we're not going metal to washer to blade, if it's because at some point you've got a washer resting against the G10, but I haven't had any issues with it being squeaky or scratchy or gritty, at least not from the factory, and carrying it for a couple months, nothing has gotten into the pivot that would cause any issues with that. Blade centering is pretty darn good from the factory. I don't know if I can kind of get that to contrast there. You can see it's almost perfectly centered. It did loosen up and pull to one side a little bit. It would push over to the one side, and I simply turned the pivot screw. I might have to add a little bit of Loctite in there to get it to stay, but it was just a simple tweak that I did a couple weeks ago. Just one little quarter turn, and it centered that blade right back up. So from the factory, I'll say it was more or less perfectly centered. Not incredibly important, as long as it's not rubbing that scale, I don't worry. But for those of you out there who might be wondering, this one in particular came perfectly centered. So very good in that respect. Overall, you know, the fit and finish for this knife, just everywhere has been really, really good. The lock type is the now famous or infamous, depending on who you are, Triad lock, which works. I don't want to get in trouble for saying this. It works similar to a lockback design, at least as far as how it is engaged and disengaged. You know, to the average user, when you depress the lock bar, it's going to seem perfectly similar to a lockback. It does have its differences, which I won't get into in this video, but it is a very strong design, and I've been really, really impressed with it overall. And you can hear when it clicks into place, and if you can hear my neighbor's compressor running in his backyard, forgive me for the noise, but hopefully you can hear just how loud and authoritative that is when it locks into place, which is really pleasing. It's fun to clack it in place. It makes a really cool sound. And if you're a knife enthusiast, you know little details like that are fun and kind of make a knife a little bit more interesting. But yeah, the Triad lock, the lockup on it is astounding. I mean, it just locks into place, no wiggle, no wobble, no play. Like any knife, as I always say, if I really wrench on the knife, I can get it to have a little bit of wiggle to it, but it's not anything that I would consider play. So as far as I'm concerned, this knife will arrive to you, you know, almost certainly with zero play in any direction. And I think Cold Steel deserves some high marks. They and Andrew Demko deserve some recognition for that. No rattling parts, nothing noisy, nothing squeaky. Overall strength of both the lock, the blade, and the handle is extraordinarily high, and I have every confidence in the design. From the factory, the edge was very sharp, as I mentioned. I've sharpened it a little bit on my Spyderco Sharp Maker, and the bevels on the knife are a little bit uneven as far as their angle. One side was a little bit closer to the 15 degree angle on my Sharp Maker, and the other one was at 20. Now, I've not gone to the effort yet of making those edges match perfectly. I haven't had to sharpen it that far, so mostly a few light strokes, just getting it freehand on the sharpener on my own to bring each edge in a little bit closer to where it was from the factory, and then a light stropping has kept it razor sharp without any hassles. But you know, it's not the most perfect edge bevels that I've ever seen. Just putting that out there. Cuts easily, as I mentioned before. The design makes it it's very thin edge that goes into the material that you're cutting. So despite the fact that it is very thick at the spine, that hollow grind and how high it is, how high it starts, means that the actual cutting edge is very, very thin and very effective. It holds an edge decently, about average for AOS 8A, so for those of you who don't like it, you're not going to find anything to like here. This isn't going to change your mind. For those of you that already prefer this steel and you like how quickly and easily it sharpens and how fine of an edge that steel can take, you will be quite pleased with this knife as well. Real quick, let me give you just kind of a general rundown, as I like to usually do in my videos, of my pros and cons. For the pros, I'm got to go with, you know, it being a great design first and foremost. I love the way this knife looks. Not overly aggressive despite it being all black. Just a really good looking knife. I think it just, you know, some knives really speak to you, and this one I've been looking at for a long time. And once I finally bought it, got it in my hands, I was very pleasantly surprised, and it kind of reaffirmed my you know, aesthetic opinion, which is that it looks really cool, feels even better. So as far as the actual design, fantastic knife that I can't say enough cool things about. Excellent blade shape that cuts easily, feels comfortable in your hand and in your pocket. The steel, that AUS 8A, super easy to touch up and maintain. Very light jimping, almost no jimping, which for me is really cool. Might not matter to you. And I wouldn't worry too much about the jimping. With that aggressive G10, the jimping isn't even going to be an issue. You're never going to lose your grip on this knife. Excellent lockup, super tough lock. I think the price for what you get is absolutely astounding. I think it's an excellent deal. It's probably one of the best deals on the market in this price range. And if you're at all interested in the design of this knife and you've been looking at it, don't even hesitate. Just run out and buy one. You'll love it. The pocket clip is strong, not too long, not too short. You know, just a really nice pocket clip design. So those are the things I really like about it. I don't really have a whole lot of things I don't like about it, so this list is going to be kind of short. For some people, not myself, but for some, the texturing on the G10 may be considered to be too aggressive. So if you don't like a real grippy, kind of rough sensation or texture on your knives, you might not like this knife because of that. Not a problem for me, so I don't even really consider it a con. Just kind of a heads up for those of you who might have an issue with that. I would have preferred an uncoated blade, uncoated clip, and back spring, or excuse me, lock bar. But this is how Cold Steel ships them. I'm not really sure why. I think maybe it's part of their marketing. You know, it's the all black. It's very tactical, very cool, very intimidating looking. If that floats your boat, awesome. If not, get it anyway. You'll still like it. I'm not the biggest fan of the all black knives, and I still love this knife to death. So, you know, that's not really a knock against it either. And finally, one quick thing that I will mention that I'm going to list it as a con, but I mean, it really comes down to personal opinion. And this is something that I've arrived at through some opinions and comments I received on YouTube from some members. And thank you if you were one of those who posted an opinion on this. And also just some research I've done online, which is that the lock bar on the Lawman, the spring tension, the back spring, is sometimes aggressive and sometimes not. So sometimes you'll get one and the back spring is very tough to overcome. It's gotten a little bit easier on mine, but over several weeks, I have noticed that it's pretty tough. In fact, let me kind of back out on the camera here, and I'll show you how with lockback knives, for better or worse, the way that I like to disengage a lockback knife is to push on the lock with one hand, and if at all possible, let the blade drop against my finger, and then close it the rest of the way, so I can just do it with one hand. There are a few other methods to do it one-handed, but that's my preferred method. And with the American Lawman, at least this particular model, I have to push very aggressively into that lock back to get it to kind of flick down. So on my brother-in-law's model, which I purchased for him as a birthday gift, I don't have to put nearly as much pressure into the lock bar in order to get it to disengage. So that is going to vary, and I know that as a fact. When I look online, there are many people who describe varying levels of tension in that back spring. I also had a member tell me that it can be adjusted without too much trouble. I might try it, I might not. You do want, you know, a bit of tension in that lock bar, and that spring. You know, the tougher the spring is to overcome, I think that it lends a little bit of strength to the design, and it'll probably give you a little bit more confidence in its ability to snap open and stay locked. You know, you don't want to be able to overcome that too easily. You don't want to be able to just gently squeeze the knife and have the blade drop. So I'll probably leave it the way it is, but it's something to put out there. I didn't really want to call it a negative for this knife, but another thing to note. But I mean, really, that's it. It's all positive. Very few bad things to say about this knife, and even then, I'm just kind of nitpicking. So you really can't go wrong with it. I've used it for just general EDC tasks, you know, light utility cutting, stuff around the house. Cardboard, I've cut up a ton of cardboard with this knife. That coating is held up, and the blade, the edge lasts a very long time before it needs a resharpening. So I have very few complaints with this knife. I'm really happy with it. Very tactically styled. You know, it's kind of got those tactical leanings like a lot of Cold Steel designs do. But don't, if that's not the design you're interested in, don't let it scare you away, because this knife still performs fantastically in pretty much any role. So don't let that kind of lead you astray. Forget about the tactical aspects of this knife and just enjoy it as a fantastic overall utility blade. Highly recommended. Fantastic value. One of my now favorite knives that I've ever used. And I plan on using this knife for many years to come. So if you're thinking about getting one, jump on it. If you haven't considered one before, I hope you'd enjoy this video, and you know, you learn a few things about it, and maybe this will kind of open your eyes to a design that you didn't give much, you didn't give it much notice or much attention before. So that's it. That's my review of the Cold Steel American Lawman, model number 58AL. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll come back to you with some more videos soon. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.